Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. From Peterson's, I'm your host, Taylor Sienkiewicz, and you're listening to You Have a Cool Job, a podcast highlighting those who took their profession in a unique direction and what they did to get there. Today's podcast is sponsored by Pathway U, the science behind education and careers that fit. Pathway U is the online platform that anyone can use for guidance on education pathways, career options, and job choice decisions. Empower yourself with purpose and connect to meaningful work life that fits you best. And the first 2,000 Peterson's listeners will receive a free assessment by visiting petersons.pathwayu.com or clicking the link in the post. Now, on with the show. Since our sponsor this month is Pathway U, a product of jobZology, we decided to interview one of the fascinating founders of the company, Bryan Dik. Bryan is the co-founder and chief science officer of jobZology, as well as a psychology professor at Colorado State University. I first asked him about his inspiration to kickstart jobZology.
Well, I'm a vocational psychologist by training. That's a subfield kind of within counseling psychology that focuses on better understanding and help people in the process of their career development. And when I started my career, I still am a faculty member at Colorado State. And one of the things within that role that we do is research and also training and practice. And so all those things are related. So a lot of the research I have been doing focuses on helping people get more out of their career, help them think of it as a calling and derive more purpose from it. And so part of that is just gathering data from them, analyzing it, writing that up to better understand that process. But obviously the question is, how can we help people achieve that? And one way is through career counseling. And so at the university, I train our PhD students to do that. But to me, it felt really important to find ways to scale that, to make career development support democratized, something that's really easily, widely accessible. And so that's when we kind of started thinking about how to do that using technology. And myself and Kurt Kreger, one of my partners in jobZology, who's an industrial organizational psychologist, started to work on what is really kind of a crude prototype of a career assessment system. We got some grant funding to make it much better, and then the university connected us to our two other partners who are entrepreneurs, Eric and Travis, and together we started laying the groundwork to take this kind of crude idea and turn it into something that's slick and effective and something that can be made widely accessible using a business model. So really it's about taking what we had been learning at the university regarding, helping people understand themselves better and then find ways to live that out in the world of work and create a product that could help people make that happen.
I asked Bryan about the process of the Pathway U assessment and how the program helps users with next steps in their career search.
So the idea is a user can create an account and really briefly, in about 20 minutes really, on any device, take a series of assessments, get immediate feedback on things like their interests and values and personality and workplace preferences. And then that in itself provides users with a deeper sense of self-understanding. They get to kind of know and articulate what their tendencies are better, what kinds of things that might be really appealing to them within the world of work. But then we take that data and we have proprietary algorithms that are used to recommend career paths that fit. And so once you get your results, you can dive into kind of search the career paths that are recommended for you, take a look at themes that cut across them, get a clearer sense of what options and opportunities might be out there. And then we load users up with a job search tool. They can actually look for open jobs, sortable by zip code and by how well they fit, so that within their local area, they can see real opportunities and actually apply for them directly through the site. And then we provide some support in the form of some workbooks that helps process information using reflective writing, and then a whole toolkit with tips around implementing a job choice. So resume writing, cover letters, networking, interviews, negotiating a job offer, all of that stuff.
Okay, so it's really from start to finish the job search.
Yeah, that's the idea. Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so Bryan, what is it like to run something that's first a startup, like with an idea that comes from some colleagues at your school to having this developed online-based company?
Right. Well, it's really been kind of an interesting and exciting adventure, I would say. One of the things I learned early on was some of the rules and norms that govern life in a university are very different than the rules and norms that govern life as an entrepreneur, right? So deadlines matter more in the real world, I like to say, than in the academic world, for example. The pace of things is much faster in the entrepreneurial world than in the university world. Especially with a small company, you're trying to ride what you're passionate about to create amazing things that make the world better. But in order to be successful at that, you have to figure out a way to bring home the bacon, to bring in some revenue and reinvest that. And in order to do that efficiently, you really have to be nimble and pay attention to opportunities that are out there. And that kind of flexible thinking that's required is really, it can be challenging at times, but it's also part of it that makes it the most fun and exciting, I think.
Right. And did you learn a lot about running a business through trial and error then, or did you get some help from other entrepreneurs that you partnered with, or how did you make that flow?
Yeah, well, I'm very blessed, first of all, to have, 3 other partners. Mm-hmm. There's a team of 4 that co-founded the company, and 2 of the 4, Eric Leftwich and Travis Hevelone, have a long background in technology and in running businesses. And so Kurt and I, the faculty members, really, we had some ideas of how things would work, but they had a lot of experience and had tested some of the assumptions that we had. So there was a lot of trial and error, but I personally had the luxury of leaning on 2 really experienced entrepreneurs who had been around the block. And so that made things easier. The other thing I would say, very early on, the university helped us out. They kind of connected us with resources to get the ball rolling. Some of the legal aspects of setting up a company, and that was really helpful. And then the last thing I'll just mention, when we were first getting started, we were in an incubator, right? We were part of an organization where we were around other new companies who were just getting started, and there was access to mentors and lunch and learn opportunities, and just a lot of resources specifically tailored to help people who are trying to get a business off the ground. That was important to us to be in that environment. We fed off the energy that we experienced being around other companies who were in a similar state, startup mode that we were. And we also had the chance to learn lessons from what we saw around us, both what worked really well and what didn't work so well. And so all of that, you really have to, I think, have a learning orientation in order to do this, right? Constantly testing your assumptions and looking around you at what other people are doing so that you can learn from them. And, we've been blessed to have a lot of exposure and opportunities to interact with those kinds of resources.
Okay. Yeah, great. And on the other hand, in terms of your work at CSU as a psychology professor, do you want to tell me a little bit about that and how that coincides with your business?
Sure. So I say my job title or professional identity as a vocational psychologist. And what that means is all the roles I play, it's really about developing ways to help people understand what makes them unique, learn about their gifts, and then find pathways they can follow in order to use those gifts to make the world better. And so the business provides an opportunity to kind of develop products that people can access easily and widely to make that happen. On the university side, I teach, I do research, and I provide training for our PhD students in counseling psychology around career assessment. And so a lot of what I learn at the university is directly applicable to the kind of products we develop through jobZology, most notably Pathway U, right? So, and then some of what we learn on the business side from Pathway U, feedback we get, for example, on the product gets me thinking about some kind of question we can test using science. So then I take it to the lab and talk about it with my graduate students, and we come up with studies that allow us to explore those kinds of things. So it can be a challenge to balance and manage wearing different hats, but at its best, these things really build on each other, and the kind of connections between them are really super exciting.
Mm-hmm. Right, and I know a lot of professors are encouraged to kind of have those outside experiences to connect their students.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, it's an important function of the university and part of the mission. We sometimes you hear about the ivory tower phenomenon, where scholars do really high quality research, and it's only ever really consumed by other scholars. It doesn't trickle down to have any meaningful impact in the real world. And that, I think, is a tragedy when that happens. Frankly, it's really important to us to find ways to take what we're learning in psychological research and then find ways to apply it and make it accessible to people on the street, in the real world. And Pathway U provides a really obvious and exciting example of a way to do that.
Right. And Bryan, I can make some assumptions like PhD in psychology, but can you tell me a little bit about your educational background and professional background aside from what you're doing now?
Well, all this started, let me go way back. So when I was an undergraduate, I was one of these folks who had a hard time making decisions about what to do with my life. It's not that I didn't have anything I was interested in. The opposite was the case. I was interested in all kinds of things, and the thought of choosing one path, if that meant not choosing something else, that was very difficult for me. It almost paralyzed my decision making. I didn't want to get it wrong. And so I kind of explored alternatives, and psychology was always pretty exciting to me. Other things were too, but psychology seemed to fit the bill. I decided, hey, I'll go into grad school. What area within psychology should I pursue? And counseling psych seemed like the broadest area to me. People with a counseling psych PhD could teach. They could do research. They could go into private practice, consult for organizations. And so by choosing that path, I knew I was effectively delaying the decision of what I was going to do with my life, but it was also a path that opened up lots of possibilities. And so I went to graduate school, got a PhD in counseling psychology, was paired with an advisor who had become a world expert on vocational interest measurement. So that's when I started learning about assessment and career development and vocational interests and career decision-making, career counseling, all that stuff. And at some point along the way, I thought, how can I really make this something that matters to me personally, given my values? And then I started studying meaning and purpose and a sense of calling, these deeper existential things that matter when people think about their work. And that ultimately led to this faculty job that I have now at Colorado State. They were interested in someone with a career development background who could teach those kinds of courses and do that kind of training. And I've been really blessed here to have a lot of freedom and latitude. We've been really productive in the lab publishing research on these kinds of topics, but also also having the freedom and the encouragement really to explore innovative ways of applying that research. That's where jobZology and Pathway U comes from. And so, the kind of scientific background, training as a psychologist, but also training as a clinician as well, and finding ways to put those things together, all of those have formed the foundation that opened up the opportunities I've followed to where I am now.
Okay, and so you've been doing both of these things of teaching and running jobZology for several years now. So what, I guess, inspires you to continue building on and pursuing both of these passions of yours that also work together?
Well, I see them being very closely connected. Mm-hmm. And so part of it is I can see how the work that we do in the lab and in the classroom at Colorado State provides knowledge that we can apply directly within Pathway U. And then kind of like I was explaining before, when we get feedback on what's working and what could be improved within Pathway U, that often opens up possibilities to run new experiments and surveys and studies to test some interesting ideas within the lab. And so I think it's really important to kind of keep that back and forth connection going. The other thing is, as a faculty member, I'm part of a community of scholars internationally, where I frequently have the privilege of traveling to conferences all over the world and presenting research and interacting with other scholars at other places, and often collaborating on joint projects with them. And that always helps me kind of just question my assumptions and ask new, interesting questions. All of that stuff really is energizing and exciting. It keeps us really vibrant, but it also just gives us, I think, a constant pipeline of new ideas that we can apply within the business. So to me, it's really important to wear both hats. Sometimes people ask me, wouldn't it be easier if you just kind of had one job? And in a sense, it would be easier, but boy, it would just be nowhere near as rich. And it seems like I would just have nowhere near the potential to have positive impact in the world that I get to enjoy having both of these things. So to me, it just makes life a lot richer.
Okay, great. And Bryan, another thing that I found when I was internet stalking you was that you were featured on Fox 31 about your book that you wrote called Make Your Job a Calling. So what was that experience like of being first recognized on TV and then as well as successfully publishing a book? Mm-hmm.
Well, that was a really interesting process, I would say. There's kind of two different sides to it. The book side, that's something I had always wanted to do. I'm working on another one now. Actually, I would say it's really it's exciting. It's a ton of work. Yeah. It's just a ton of work to get it right, especially if you're really paying attention to taking the science and representing it in an interesting and engaging and also accurate way to help people, which is what Make Your Job a Calling was really all about. So, it was really a challenge. But the thrill that you get from getting that box from the publisher as the book is released and holding that in your hand and knowing that, this is now in bookstores all over the country and world. It's been translated into a few different languages. That feels like a contribution. It feels like you've done something that matters to people. And then the other thing it does is it opens up opportunities. So that's where, like the television appearance came from, and there's a radio tour and lectures all over the world around that. When you are able to take what you're working on and publish it in something that is accessible to people that they can read, then they want to know more. And so there are a lot of opportunities to go out and share more. And there's notoriety, I guess, and my mom and my dad sure thought it was cool to see the clip of me on TV, but it's just a platform. It provides an access to a broader audience to take what what you're working on and use it to get people to think differently about their lives. That's the most satisfying and fulfilling part of it, I would say.
Bryan focuses on feelings of purpose and meaning in people's work and helping others find their own path, which is exactly what we want for all of you. We hope you're inspired by Bryan's story to find a career that fits your interests and values. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.